Breaking tonight, we're watching Cleveland, Ohio for any reaction after a grand jury decides not to charge two white police officers in the shooting death of a 12-year-old. More than a year ago, this case sparked nationwide protests back in November 2014. Two Cleveland police officers responded to a 911 call. Emergency dispatchers allegedly told the cops that someone was waving a gun in the park. That person turned out to be Tamir Rice. Surveillance video showed the police cruiser pulling up. The officers allegedly told Rice to drop his weapon, but instead, the county prosecutor says Rice pulled it from his waistband. One officer opened fire, hitting Rice in the stomach. The 12-year-old died the next day. Later, we learned this gun was just a toy, but it's certainly built to look like the real thing. Now, a grand jury has decided the police acted they had at the time. In a moment, we'll be joined by Ohio Governor, Republican presidential candidate John Kasich. But first, we begin with Brian Claypool, a civil rights and criminal defense attorney. All right, Brian, are you surprised at all by the decision? Is it what you were expecting?
Well, based on past history, Shannon, across the country, as far as not indicting, not surprised by indict. But I think if you parse away the evidence here and you look carefully at policies and procedures of police departments in other cities, I think a good case could have been made for an indictment.
Well, those who've reviewed the tape, and we heard from the prosecutor today, and he said basically looking it over based on what they knew at the moment as it was happening. Now, we've heard there were 911 calls that said it could be a fake gun, this might be a juvenile. Reportedly, those messages never made it to the officers. They pulled up on the scene. They reported this young man pulling out something that looked very much like a real gun. There wasn't that orange safety tip on it. And basically, the grand jury found that they acted reasonably, that there was no way under those circumstances, knowing what they knew in that moment, that they could have made a different decision. Obviously, everybody grieves that any family should lose a 12-year-old with a toy gun.
Right. Right. Shannon, there's no question this is a difficult case. I can see arguments on both sides. As far as reaching a decision not to indict, you've got to take into consideration facts such as this park is not like a seaside or a lakeside community. It's not a posh neighborhood. It's an area where two prior police officers had been killed. So the responding police officer knows that. He's going into a dangerous area. He doesn't receive the information that this could be potentially a fake gun. He doesn't receive the information that it's a juvenile. So he goes into the situation, all that considered. He then is sitting there. He's got a split second to decide what to do, and then he sees allegedly Tamir reaching for his waist, and at that point, the law is on his side. Because the law is that if this officer believes objectively that he's in imminent fear of grave bodily harm, he can shoot. So that's the case to not indict. But the case to indict, Shannon, real quick, is this. It boils down to one fact, and there's case law, federal case law supporting this. If the police officer placed himself unreasonably in a situation where he too close to the defendant or the suspect, such that he created a condition where he had to use deadly force, then an argument can be made under case law that that is excessive force. The problem I have is the officer shooting right up 2 feet from Tamir Rice. Within 2 seconds, he shoots. That's a problem. Yeah, that, you know, when you watch the tape and you hear about how it played out, it was very quick. I mean, the way that this unfolded. I want to ask you about, there are other investigations. This thing isn't over because the police say that they have an internal investigation that's going to go on as well, which could result in negative consequences for the two officers, though not criminal. There's also federal prosecutors say a civil rights investigation underway. The family has filed a civil lawsuit as well. So it's not like these officers are completely out of the woods and couldn't pay some penalty at some point. There's still a lot that has to be investigated and other potential trials to come on the civil level. Yeah, there's no question about that, Shannon, but I don't think there's going to be any administrative remedy against these police officers. They'll be back on the street. But another point we ought to talk about, too, is this colossal miscommunication between the 911 caller and then the dispatch operator. Why didn't the dispatch operator keep the caller on the phone? And then if she keeps him on the phone, then the caller can tell the operator where he is, and then that can be conveyed to the police officers. And I think there should be a federal investigation, but it's not likely. And in the end, Shannon, I think we really need to take a close look in Ohio at the training of these officers. You can maybe ask Governor Kasich, do you know that as you sit here today, that police officer in Ohio doesn't even need a high school diploma, no drug testing, no psychological testing. We need changes in Ohio.
All right, Brian, we got to leave it there. Very interesting insights. Thank you so much for your time.
You bet. Thanks for having me, Shannon.
Ohio Governor